Morning. I think we're gonna go ahead and get this started off here this morning. My name is David Tharp. I'm Executive Director for the International Association for Food Protection, and I'm also a board member of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. I've heard many excellent comments on yesterday's sessions, and so after a very successful day yesterday, we're really looking forward to today. We're glad everyone has joined us here. In addition to the audience here, we also have an internet audience watching, so we welcome you to watching on the internet also. After our two presentations this morning, there will be a live poll, so if you have your devices, whatever you might have, computers, iPhones, iPads, all those type of things, be ready to vote after the presentations. And for our audience here on site, I want to remind you that there's two breakout sessions that will follow this session, and then a networking lunch, and the closing session, the plenary, where Mike Taylor will speak, and then an exciting closing session, so you want to stay for that. Don't leave early today. Okay? But for now, I do want to allow enough time for our presenters today. If all goes as planned, we'll have some time for question and answers at the end of this session, and then again at the end of the session, we'll have the live poll. Right now, I don't want to delay us any further, so I'll introduce my board colleague, Kathy Means, from the Produce Marketing Association, to introduce our speakers today. Kathy, please join.
Thanks so much. Good morning. I can't tell you how happy we are to have all of you here. There was a lot of planning that went into this, and to actually see it come to fruition, and there you all are sitting at your seats, and there you all are watching us on the internet. So thank you very much for being here. We all know that when foodborne illness happens, it often makes the news. And that's one of the reasons that we have a strong focus on social media while you're here. What happens then? How do we get the right messages out? Who is it that consumers want to hear from? And how can science or technical information get through the clutter? How can we reach them in ways that they will understand and we don't get panics, or they do what we ask them to do, which is throw away the food that's suspect? This session is going to talk more about that, data and advice on how health and food safety educators, you, can be most effective when you're engaging consumers. And we'll tie in quite nicely with a lot of the things you've heard yesterday and then things that are yet to come. So let me introduce our speakers. I'm not big on really long introductions, so if our speakers have anything else you want people to know, just tell them. Charlie Arnot is recognized as a thought leader in food and agriculture. Highly regarded as a writer and speaker, Charlie has more than 25 years of experience in communications, public relations, and issues management within food, so he's targeted to us. He is the founder and president of CMA, an employee-owned consulting firm, and he serves as CEO of the Center for Food Integrity, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to building consumer trust and confidence in today's food system. He's a trusted counselor to CEOs, government leaders, and executives, a respected industry advisor on critical issues within the food system. He developed his peer-reviewed trust model to help clients and food and farm industry leaders build trust in their products and processes. He grew up in southeast Nebraska, which I think is wonderful because I grew up in northwest Missouri. And he has a Bachelor of Journalism degree from the University of Nebraska. He's with us particularly today because CFI's peer-reviewed and published model on building trust can make food safety education more relevant and meaningful, and the latest CFI research on moms, millennials, and foodies provides specific insight into how best to connect with these important audiences. And do you want me to introduce both speakers now and just have them go sequentially? That saves time. All right, our second speaker will be Dana Pitts. She leads scientific communications for CDC's division responsible for foodborne, waterborne, and environmental diseases, and covers both domestic and international issues. She worked as the health communications specialist for CDC's Global Disease Detection Program before her current position. And Dana began her career as a Foreign Service officer at the U.S. Department of State, which sounds fascinating to me. She later completed her Master of Public Health degree at the University of California, Los Angeles, in Policy and Management. She's worked for more than 20 years building strategic communications in a variety of fields and settings, and has extensive experience in cultivating strong partnerships among diverse organizations and stakeholders. So, Charlie, you're up first, I think, so please welcome Charlie.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Shelley, thank you for the invitation. And I'm always inspired to be speaking with Dana, so I'm anxious to hear what she has to say. She's taken a very exciting recent adventure, which I think will be very interesting to all of us. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you this morning to talk a little bit about how we can make food safety communication and food safety education more meaningful, more relevant, which is something that each of us want to do. We had the opportunity to release our research earlier this week at the National Press Club. Chris Prue from CDC was there and helped us with that as well. So you're the second audience that's had an opportunity to be exposed to any of this. So I'm excited to get your feedback on that as well. We were really excited to be able to launch this. It's the most comprehensive work we've done in the 8 years that we've done consumer research. And so we're beginning to continue to unpack it and certainly look forward to your questions and comments as we continue to go forward. Certainly want to thank those who make the research possible. Without the funding and support of Dairy Management Incorporated, Rabobank, the United Soybean Board, and the American Farm Bureau Federation, we would not be able to continue to conduct the kind of research that we do, and we appreciate their financial support. This year, we do a national survey of 2,005 Americans that reflect the overall general population, but we also wanted to focus specifically on moms, millennials, and foodies. They are not mutually exclusive groups. 30% of this year's respondents were moms, 37% were millennials, those between 18 and 33, and 21% were foodies. Now, to qualify as a foodie, you had to rank your level of agreement or score or concern on 29 different attitudinal or behavioral statements. So you had to qualify on all 29 of those to be qualified as a foodie. So we did the battery of 29, and we also said, I classify myself as a foodie. Lots of people do that. Significantly fewer actually qualify on all 29 different attributes. So you could see the mix of respondents we have there. Again, it does reflect the overall U.S. population. Slightly less than half of the total respondents qualified, many of those being men. Each year we begin the research by giving consumers a list of 18 different issues that might be of concern in their life, everything from the U.S. economic situation to unemployment, my personal health, economics, etc. And consistently what we find are those issues that are directly outside of my control tend to rate as a higher level of concern. The percentages you see there on the screen indicate the percentage of top box concern, 8, 9, or 10, on the overall population. 72% rated rising health care cost as a top box concern. Same percent the rising cost of food. Notice 69% rated a top box concern for keeping healthy food affordable. In terms of the other specific concerns related just to food, food safety consistently comes up as number one. So once you get beyond the cost of food, food safety, whether it's the safety of imported food or domestic food, continues to be the top-rated concern. Moms, generally, women are more concerned about all issues than men, not surprisingly. And early adopting consumers, those who have higher education, greater social status, higher incomes, tend to have a higher level of concern than other adopter categories. And the lowest level of concern this year and consistently, as we've seen over time, is for having enough food to feed people outside the United States. Doesn't simply resonate as well with those in the United States. Concerns that are directly impact me and my family consistently have a higher level of concern than concerns that impact other things, whether it's the environment or animal care or those outside the United States. But those issues that might impact me and my family tend to have a higher level of concern. As we break those down then by the categories, moms, millennials, and foodies, we begin to see then some segmentation and some trends emerge that can be somewhat interesting. For moms, the top-rated concern, the rising cost of food, followed by keeping healthy food affordable. was the second concern. Then rising healthcare costs, rising energy costs, and then food safety. For millennials, the top concern was keeping healthy food affordable. 18 different concerns they might face in their life, whether it's unemployment, my personal economic situation, rising healthcare costs, 18 different issues. Number one for millennials is keeping healthy food affordable. Then the rising cost of food, rising healthcare cost, U.S. economy. And for foodies, guess what? Keeping healthy food affordable. Also the number one concern. And look at that score on a scale of 0 to 10, 9.27. You never see a score above 9 on anything, and yet for foodies, virtually all of their scores were above 9. So these issues clearly are issues that define this category of the population. These are issues that define who they are. They're personally relevant, they're important to them, they're issues that they take very seriously. Then food safety, number 2 for them, rising cost of food, rising healthcare costs, and then followed by the U.S. economy as well. So it's interesting that keeping healthy food affordable is the first or second rated for those 3 groups, and it's also number 1 for early adopters. We're not going to spend time going into them this morning simply because of the limited time available. So that's a real opportunity, I think, for those in the food system to talk about what we do to keep healthy food affordable. It's a different concept than food safety. Food safety is a bit of an assumed, but keeping healthy food affordable is something gives us a platform from which we can begin to work. So as we began to develop this year's research, we wanted to know what can we do when science and consumers collide, when consumer understanding and scientific consensus aren't aligned. How can we manage that? How do we better understand how to introduce science and technical information about agriculture and food so they're considered in the social decision-making process? And then secondly, better understand communication channels and processes used by moms, millennials, and foodies and early adopters when they form attitudes and opinions about those various issues. We have more than 600 pages of results in this research. I'm just going to be able to scratch the surface this morning, but for those who are interested, I would be more than happy to provide additional information, to go into additional detail if this is something about which you have a particular interest. All of our work is based on the trust model that was mentioned earlier during the introduction, our peer-reviewed and published trust model. If you've not seen it, it's an important foundation to kind of understand how we develop who we are and what we do. Those who operate in the commercial sector are primarily interested in protecting your freedom to operate, your ability to do what you do best with a minimum amount of outside interference. Today, that requires us to consistently maintain a social license, and that's the privilege of operating with minimal formalized restrictions based on maintaining public trust. If the public trusts us to do what's right, they won't feel the need to impose more restrictions, whether they're legislative, regulatory, or market-based restrictions where a branded food company will say, I'm not comfortable any longer with that product, that processed ingredient, make it go away. So the fundamental question we wanted to address then was what drives trust? How do we go about understanding how to build trust? So we partnered with Steve Sapp at Iowa State University beginning in 2007 to examine that question. And we began with a meta-analysis of 21 different pieces of research to see if we could uncover some common themes. And in each of those individual studies, we identified the 3 drivers you see there on the left-hand side of the screen. At the very bottom, it's influential others. That's family and friends and credentialed individuals whose opinions you respect. Dietitians, veterinarians, doctors, public health officials, others like that. The second element in building trust is competency. That's our technical capacity in science. Now, historically, that's where we've spent most of our time talking about who we are and what we do. We've operated under the assumption that our challenge is an information deficit problem. And if we simply give people more information, they'll make the right decision. So if they've not yet made the right decision, we'll go get some more science and give them more information. And if they still haven't made the right decision, we'll go get some more science and we'll give them more information. Because we've operated that that's the problem, right? They simply don't have enough information. If we can simply educate them, we will be successful. The third element in building trust is confidence or the perception of shared values and ethics. Can I count on you to do what's right? So once we'd identified those 3 drivers, we then surveyed 6,000 U.S. consumers over 3 years, asking them all kinds of questions about food safety and animal care and on-farm practices, sustainability. And what we discovered was that shared values or confidence is 3 to 5 times more important than demonstrating competency in building trust. So we've had the equation exactly backward. Because the competency question is an important question, but it's not nearly as important as the confidence question, the ability to connect based on values if you want your information to be meaningful, if you want it to be relevant, and if you want it to make a difference in terms of connecting. So when we talk about building a sustainable balance at the Center for Food Integrity, we use a triangle as illustration for that because of its structural integrity. And if values are the foundation for building trust, they too have to become the foundation for that triangle. Can we effectively communicate our commitment to things like compassion, responsibility, respect, fairness, and truth? The kinds of values that people expect from us. We cannot abandon science. We absolutely must have the objective, measurable, repeatable data to prove the claims we're making. And at the end of the day, if you're not economically viable in a commercial setting, if you're not profitable, you're not truly sustainable. But the challenge is the questions we get today primarily come at the base of the triangle. Very few people are arguing the science. They're asking, should you use that ingredient? Should you process food the way you're processing it? Should it be served the way you're serving it? Should you include those agricultural practices? And our historical response has been, well, science says we can. Can and should aren't the same question. Can is a question about competency. Should is a question about values and ethics. Science will tell us if we can, but society will tell us whether or not we should. We're very good at answering the can question. We need to significantly improve our capacity to answer the should question. Because when we give people information about science and economics, we increase their knowledge, but we may do very little to influence how they feel or what they believe. And people are much more likely to make their decisions based on how they feel and what they believe than on simply what they know. So simply providing more data, more information, more facts is not likely to be effective in changing those kinds of attitudes and beliefs that will encourage changes in food safety behavior. And we have to do a better job because society benefits when we do a better job of introducing technology and innovation. Whether it's refrigeration or pasteurization or drought-tolerant hybrids, I mean, the benefits to society from the advances in science and technology in food and agriculture are innumerable. But if we can't do a better job of introducing those, our ability to continue to bring them to market will be limited. So what stands in the way? There are a number of different barriers. One of them, cultural cognition, a theory that Dan Kahn at Yale has developed, talking about the fact that we tend to conform our beliefs about controversial values to the groups to which we belong. So you're going to confirm some of your beliefs to being a food safety professional, or to being a mom, or to being a millennial, or to being a foodie. So it's like a sports fan that kind of listens to the boos and cheers from the crowd to begin to form their opinions about what they should believe. That also then contributes to some of the challenges we see in online communication, which today has become much more tribal and much more insular. Where the internet was designed to connect us and make us more homogenous, what it's actually done is created silos of interest, where we now kind of all gather in these specific silos and we tend not to be as connected as we've been. So that contributes to confirmation and limiting our access to information because we tend to look for and seek information from those who think like us, those who act like us, those who share our beliefs. And so while online communication was designed to connect us, it's actually in many cases made us much more insular and made us much more tribal. An illustration of that, the Mom Tribe, from some qualitative work we did last year in Orlando. We were talking to consumers about a variety of food issues, and the topic of GMOs came up. And so we asked this one particular mom, so help us understand, what sources of information did you use to come to the conclusion that GMOs were dangerous? And Heidi said, well, I'm part of a mom's group. And when there's a big consensus, I think there's something there. You don't need doctors or scientists confirming it when you have hundreds of moms. So that's the environment in which we find ourselves living today. Now we could go, well, Heidi, you're an idiot. Of course you need doctors and scientists. Not likely to resonate particularly well with Heidi if we do that, okay? Tribal behavior communication also leads to tribal shunning. Food shaming is a big issue today that takes place in different online communities. Here's a comment from Lisa, part of that same group. I think mom guilt is a huge factor. If someone's telling you something is dangerous, for example, fructose, and you hear the message more than once, you owe it to yourself to research it or quit consuming it. I can't keep giving my kids fructose if there's a potential problem. We have to do our best job. So we could adopt that. We could take a couple of different strategies there in terms of responding to Lisa. We could say, Lisa, here's a ream of data that shows you fructose is not a problem. Read the data and consume it. What's wrong with you? Or we could say, you know what, Lisa, I really respect the fact that you want to do the best job as a mom. There are very few jobs that are more important in the world than being a good mom, and we understand that today's environment when it comes to food is complex and confusing. How can we support you and give you the kind of information that's meaningful to you so you can do the job you want to do in being a good mom and providing that safe, nutritious food for you and your family? So it's a different way of thinking about how we engage in the conversation and debate. We also know the bias against size and scale continues to be significant, and we've got lots of research to support that. People believe we know that shared values are the foundation for building trust, but big is bad, and there is clearly a statistically inverse relationship between the size of an entity and the perception of shared values. The larger the company, the larger the organization, the more likely people are to believe you're going to put profit ahead of public interest. And that belief causes them to be skeptical and mistrusting about who you are and what you do. So let's talk more specifically about the research. We understand that consumer concern and skepticism is very understandable. Consolidation and integration and application of technology really raises questions about who benefits from that. Is it society, is it consumers, or is it only those corporations that control the technology? So our goal should not be to win a social or scientific argument, but rather to find more meaningful and relevant ways to introduce science and technology. That's really what we wanted to do in this year's research. Because if you look at the decision-making maze that consumers are faced with, it's understandable why they are so confused and the number of barriers that they have to face to go from beginning that decision-making process to an informed decision. There are so many different challenging social, psychological, and anthropological barriers that they have to overcome. We can help them navigate that, but it's going to require us to embrace a different approach. So we took some of the best models we could find from anthropology, psychology, and sociology, work around cultural cognition, risk communication, adoption and diffusion of innovation, integrated all of those into this year's research approach to try to come up with some insights that we hope will be helpful to you and others. The model that we designed is really focused on a combination of message measurement and messenger measurement because you have to integrate all of those. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the model today, but I will tell you, for those of you who like statistics, that the R-squared for messenger trust in many of those was as high as 0.94. So the model works. We've got a statistical model that shows we can get there if we design it correctly, and that's important. So what are the building blocks of technical messages? There are a handful, 4 specific fundamental message elements that we need to include as we continue to go forward. A unifying message, openness, transparency, presenting risks accurately, and leveraging trusted sources. That unifying message is really about connecting on values, that singular, compelling message that touches the deeper drivers of human behavior. Openness and transparency, acknowledging both sides of the story. Provide a level of depth so it doesn't look like you're holding back, and avoid oversimplification. You can't simply have nuclear plant on one side and a toaster on the other end and a cord between the two and say, this is how it works. People are looking for a bit more information. An accurate presentation of risks, because an accurate risk and understanding of the risk trumps the concern about unknown risks. And then leveraging trusted sources. We also identified several different outrage factors that contribute to it: voluntariness, familiarity, control, fairness, morality, process, memorability, and dread. Voluntariness, people are much more likely to be accepting risks that they embrace voluntarily rather than a coerced risk. If I choose to go skydiving, I'm going to be okay with that as opposed to someone strapping a parachute on my back and tossing me out of a plane, right? I'll feel better about that. Familiarity versus something that's unique. Handful of Ebola cases in the United States generated a great deal of media attention and concern. More than 200,000 people this year will be hospitalized by influenza, and yet we don't have that same level of public concern about that particular issue. Control, do we see appropriate government control over the particular risk? Fairness, is the risk being embraced fairly, or are people being subjected to it unfairly? Morality, if there's somebody who is doing something intentionally to undermine public benefit, that tends to be the trump card because moral issues tend to elicit a very strong emotional response. Process, is the organization or company listening? Are they willing to engage? Are they willing to participate? Memorable, is it a memorable event? So an airline disappearing in the ocean is much more memorable, but not nearly the impact as the tens of thousands who die in automobile crashes. But yet it's a memorable kind of event. And then dread, if a situation becomes too dire, very difficult to find a positive solution. So what we did is we took and developed individual scenarios using those fundamental message elements as well as the outrage factors in different scenarios, and then tested them using different messengers: mom scientist, government scientist, and a peer who shares my interest about food. We took 2 issues that we knew were controversial and complex as stimulus for this process. I want to emphasize this research was not designed to specifically address either GMOs or antibiotic use. It was designed to create models, but we had to find stimulus that we knew were controversial and complex. Both of those 2 issues qualify, but the models can be applied across other issues as well. So which messengers are most trusted? We developed a messenger composite score looking at competency, confidence, trust, and whether they view the messenger as a credible source of information. And then we developed a composite score based on that. And on the antibiotic issue, as well as the GM issue, what we found was a mom scientist was the best messenger around that particular issue, followed by a government scientist, followed by a peer who shares my interest. But it was fascinating to look at what happened during the research in the change between a peer who shares my interest and a government scientist. Originally, before they read any kind of information, the ranking was mom scientist, right? She's a mom, she shares my values, and she has a technical credential. And then a peer who shares my interests, because that's someone who shares my values. And then a government scientist, probably a cold, unrelatable bureaucrat, right? Not somebody I can connect to. But guess what? After they read the information, and the government scientist started that information by talking about his or her values and the commitment to doing what's right, their score shot way up. And the peer score dropped because we're talking about technically complex issues where people wanted more than just somebody who shares my interest. They want someone who has some expertise. They're looking for a credential. They're looking for knowledge. So when you combine the two, it's powerful. So if we can get government scientists and other scientists to connect based on values, your ability to communicate and connect is going to be significantly greater than it's ever been before. We saw the exact same thing when it came to GMOs. So whether antibiotics or GMOs, the mom scientist started out first because she starts with a perception of shared values and she has a credential. We saw the same flip-flop between government scientist and a peer who shares my interest. So what promotes messenger trust? As again, we look at that model, whether it's believability, promoting comfort, competence, or confidence, what we really found was that confidence and competence are both highly related there, but confidence, again, or shared values, is usually twice as important as competency. And when it comes to predicting confidence, believability is the key component. Do people believe the message? That's the key driver for building trust. And so what we did then was we began to statistically measure which of those elements that we talked about in terms of all of the different things, whether it was the fundamental message elements or the outrage factors, which of those had the greatest statistical contribution to believability, because that's what we wanted to be able to determine. What we identified was that communicating risks accurately was statistically significant in 18 of 20 models. Being an open and transparent was statistically significant in 17 of 20 models. That unifying message, where you're connecting based on values and deeper drivers of human emotion, significant in 11 of those 20 models. Leveraging trusted sources, significant in 5 of 20 models. The typical outrage factors, is there appropriate government control? People want to know that somebody's watching the store. That was statistically significant in 17 of the models. The process, is the organization open, willing to engage in conversation, willing to engage in discussion about the issue, statistically significant in 12 of those 20 models. Fairness was significant in 1, familiarity significant in 1, voluntariness significant in 1. So if you were to take home one quick message from this, if you're looking at developing more effective communication and outreach, incorporate those 5 different elements. Accurate presentation of risks, being more open and transparent, that unifying message that connects on values, demonstrating appropriate government control, and having an organization that's willing to be involved in the process. Be confident that you can communicate and engage in that process, being willing to share information. Just a couple of things before I close up here. Tracking attitudes, great news for food safety. Every indicator about food safety this year was positive. And the positive in the trend lines over the last 7 years for food safety has been very positive. We ask each year for consumers to rate their level of agreement on a series of statements from 0 to 10, where 0 to 3 is relatively low agreement, 4 to 7 is kind of ambivalent, 8 to 10 is a strong level of agreement. So I'll just share the food safety here before we close, just to give you an insight into kind of how things are tracking and moving over time. The statement, I'm confident in the safety of the food I eat, you can see 37% strongly agree with that compared to 32% last year. But look at the trend line from 2007 to today. It's been very positive, from 5.64 to 6.47 on a mean score. Now, 6.47 is not a great mean score, but it's a positive trend line. We're making progress. Things are moving in the right direction there. I am as confident in the safety of the food I eat as I was 1 year ago. 36% strongly agreed compared to 31%. A 5% increase in top box agreement is significant. And again, look at the trend line as people's confidence year over year continues to improve from 5.17 to 6.36. Those are numbers to be celebrated as we think about what's taking place. Today's food supply is safer than it was when I was growing up. This is one that historically was a problem for us because people have that romantic notion that things used to be better when we were slaughtering our own beef and putting the primals on the same table where I kept my shop tools. Not so good. 27% strongly agree with that this year compared to 22% last year. And again, from 4.44 in 2007 to 5.63. Significant improvement. 5.63 isn't where we want to be. We want to get up in the sevens, but we're making progress. And government food safety agencies are doing a good job ensuring the safety of the food we eat. 29% strongly agree with that compared to 26% last year. And again, trend line continues to be very positive over the last 7 years. So the progress is steady. We're making progress. Improvements continue to be made on all of those indices. So it's something about which you can take some great pride. We do have some future webinars coming up, a number of those. I'll just get through these quickly and then kind of give you some information on the website where you can go and get additional information. We have a 24-page summary of the website of the research that you can download at foodintegrity.org if you are so inclined, and we certainly have additional information. If you'd like a presentation or more information, please let us know. As I mentioned, we've got 600-plus pages of research, some great stuff here. The one thing I will leave you with, though, just a quick thing in terms of ranking trusted sources of information, we asked for a number of different things from farmers to veterinarians to scientists to Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz was last on every scale. So. I'll leave you with that bit of good news and turn it over to my inspiring colleague, Dana Pitts. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thank you. And I have to admit, Charlie's a really hard act to follow. So I'll try my best. But as Charlie did say, I have been on a bit of an adventure. For the past 3 months, I have actually not been doing food safety. But I've been working on Ebola. 2 months at CDC's Emergency Operations Center, and I just got back from Guinea last week. So what I thought I would do, because this is such an amazing audience to be in front of. In fact, I really want to thank you. You know, I don't know how many of you, let's say a show of hands, where I work, sometimes communication is a hard sell. You know, does anybody else join me in that? You know, please don't be shy. And I just thought, you know, as you do your presentation, people say, well, who's the audience? And I said, oh, it's a bunch of communicators and educators. I mean, what a gift, what a joy. Thank you, and thank you, Shelley. Thanks to all of you. So the other thing is, as I was preparing, I thought that I was doing a presentation on meaningful messages, and I looked at it, I said, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I don't have to do it on meaningful messages, but on messengers, because although I could spend an hour telling you how at CDC I'm able to somehow make meaningful messages out of all of the different clearance that we have. We have many cooks in our kitchen. It goes around to all the agencies, sometimes all of you, and to come out with a message that is meaningful is really difficult. But messengers, now that's something to talk about. And I got some inspiration from Guinea that I want to talk with you about. So if I wasn't convinced before, after Guinea, I am absolutely convinced that the key to successful leadership is influence, not authority. I mean, how much can you get away with because I said so? I mean, that stopped working with my kids when they were 2. You know, now you have to do that. You know, why? Because I said so. You know, that just does not work, does it? And, you know, it doesn't even work for us with the messages that we know we should do. I mean, you know, how many of us, I mean, we should, I'm sure everybody's going to say they, you know, use a thermometer because I said so. But sometimes it's just the messenger that gets it through, even to messages that you know, shouldn't be a hard sell. So, you know, with food safety, there's a lot of opportunities for messaging to people and for messengers, different messengers, right? We need people. We need all different people, and all different messengers make a difference with all of these different kinds of people, right? Yet, who are the messengers that really can make a difference, can move an industry, can move a mom? Well, let me take you to Guinea, because I met 3 different messengers that truly inspired me, not only there, but with lessons I'd like to bring back. So, Guinea, one of 3 of what we call Ebola-affected countries. It's actually the larger of all the other 2 countries, Sierra Leone and Liberia. Population of over 10 million people. It's mostly a Muslim country. 94% of the people there are Muslim. And right now, where we are in the outbreak is that 2,100 illnesses and about 1,300 deaths. Very sobering. In fact, when I came back from Guinea just last week, my son asked me how it was, and I just broke down. In fact, I had to bring a tissue here because you just never know. But it really moved me. It's the poorest country I've ever been in. On the ride from the airport to the hotel, I kept thinking, now where does the slum end? And it just doesn't. It's tremendously difficult in a country like that does not have the infrastructure to fight a deadly disease like Ebola. So what do we need to do? It's in the messages. But guess what? Community resistance to the message, that's what's really stopping us. It's really hard. And let me tell you what messengers don't work. The ones in spacesuits. By the time that they come knocking to a door to a village, it's too late. You know, the messages, clear messages, what they are is early treatment, isolate the sick, don't touch them, comply with contact tracers, and bury the dead safely. You think, well, those are clear, those are easy. Tell a mom not to touch her child. It's really tough, really a hard sell. So we need messengers. I was able to be part of a series of town hall talks that started in Conakry, the capital of Guinea, and has eventually moved all throughout Guinea. And in working in that, I met 3 different people who changed me, and I'm very inspired by, and I'd like us to be inspired by as well. So the first town hall was in a commune called Matoto. And I'd like you to meet our ambassador, U.S. Ambassador Lassakis, who's Greek-American, who is a career diplomat, and who has been in some of the toughest settings in the world. And wonderful man. I, in fact, grew to love Guinea because of his love for Guinea. He took us through different villages. We went swimming in an African river. I learned about the art, the poetry. And in one of the series of town halls that I was sitting in the back of, we actually had to make this town hall earlier because the day before there was rioting. And one of the ways to treat Ebola is to construct new Ebola treatment centers, and we were going to construct one. Well, MSF was going to construct one next to a soccer field. Now, that's tough. And so there was a riot of youth. And our ambassador got in front of standing room only crowd, hot. I was standing between young men, and he addressed them, not just hello, but for a full 10 minutes in their local language, Susu. I've never had this experience as a communicator as I stood there and watched a crowd of young men, mostly, go from this, looking at each other, over me, started high-fiving each other, and at the end of his talk, they fist pumped. It was amazing. And he had to ask for their support. That was not easy. He spoke the local language. He met them where they were at. Fascinating. Meet Marie-Claire. Marie-Claire is a survivor of Ebola, a reluctant speaker. She didn't want to speak. We met for lunch a few weeks prior because the woman that we wanted to speak, who is quite a practiced public speaker, could not do it. So, Marie-Claire, I learned what a wonderful story. She is one of 8 children, 8 girls, and grew up in a rural part of Guinea, and she was the only one that's educated, and she actually could have been a doctor. You know why she didn't want to be a doctor? She wanted to be a nurse because she could touch people. Guess what happened when she touched a person from Liberia in the hospital that she was working at? She got Ebola. She stood there and did not, at first, the first time she spoke, she did not want to be photographed, did not want to be covered on the news, and she got up there and spoke boldly about getting early treatment, not being afraid, and you can survive Ebola. That's a very, very powerful message, especially to healthcare workers who are seeing an uprise of cases of Ebola in healthcare workers. They're scared. Finally, meet Dr. Diallo, a young imam. That's really a tough sell, safe burials. And Dr. Diallo stood there and said, no serious religion can clash with serious science. What an amazing message. And the College of Imams is put forth instructions that all people who die of Ebola must be buried by healthcare workers. These were 3 powerful messengers that I ran into that I think we can learn some lessons from as food safety educators. So what did I learn from them? 3 things I want you to walk away with. Hit home, hit the heart, and hit hard. So let's look at how we can do that as food safety educators. Hitting home, what are some examples? You know, how hard is it to learn another language? It's really hard, and sometimes it's the flavor of what you say. And you know what? When it comes to outbreaks, really, they're all local, right? They all start someplace local. And it's really important to address the local outbreaks. Who I think does a wonderful job of that is Barf Blog. I just found something that they put up the other day. And at CDC, we communicate about multi-state outbreak, but it's you, locals. You're the ones in the trenches. Your outbreaks. There's so many outbreaks that happen locally. How do you communicate about those? There is something that we covered in MMWR about tracking outbreaks in New York City through Yelp. That's fascinating. Even with multi-state outbreaks, this is a multi-state outbreak, obviously illnesses all over the United States, but how different is it to communicate, in California versus Louisiana? You're out there. I asked Shelley, 400 of you, how many different zip codes do you cover? And I think that's one thing that we could do a better job of CDC is connecting to you. What do you need from us to communicate, even in multi-state outbreaks, with local context, local language, local flavor? That's really important. Even when we have multi-state outbreaks of certain foods that tend to hit different populations. So here we have the Roos cheese. Most of you know about that. FDA did a great job. They had a web page in Spanish. But you know what? We didn't do any social media in Spanish. And did we even hit the states, the communities? I don't know. That's what we need you for. I love USDA. I think they've done a great job in really tracking local, conversations, hashtags. A few years ago, Chris, I hope you'll answer some questions later. I heard you speak yesterday. They have just multiplied their Twitter following because they track conversations that trend. Sharknado. So, they're doing just fascinating things, and that's they're following local conversations that we can do on Twitter. So let's look at hitting the heart. Obviously, stories of people who have suffered from foodborne illness. STOP does a great job with that. And we have Barb Kowalczyk and her mom, who I don't know if they're here this morning. Honestly, they are heroes to me. How hard is it to lose a child to something that is preventable? And they have really devoted their lives to making a difference. There's a lot of people out there Dana, who was here yesterday and shared her story. What I learned from working with Marie Claire is that, it takes a lot of sensitivity to work with people who have suffered. They're not victims, they're heroes. And, we have to be sensitive. What do they need? Do they need support? Do they need a listening ear? Do they need money for what they want to do? People who have gone through experiences are very powerful and make it relevant. And we need to be aware of that as educators. I thought what Barb shared yesterday was also very moving. She shared that, sometimes you can feel like people think, well, you must have done something wrong because it's happened to you. How wrong is that? It's our job as communicators and educators to dispel those myths. STOP has also done a great job in connecting people who have suffered back to the producers, back to the industry that they had been harmed by. There's a lot of forgiveness that needs to go on there. I love journalists. I consider them part of my team. There's nothing like a journalist that can tell a good story, right? With all of the different people who have to weigh in on our messages for clearance. Find a good journalist, tell a story. Maren McKenna is wonderful. I don't know if you've ever read this book, her chapter on listeriosis. it just draws you in. In one chapter, she talks about the bug, she talks about PFGE, she talks about PulseNet, it's a love story, it's a tragedy. You really learn about listeria through a storyteller, Maren McKinney. There's plenty of storytellers, plenty of journalists out there. There's a program called Night Fellowship, and CDC sends its scientists to work with people. But you know, how many educators? We need to get food safety educators to work with journalists, so when they cover things, it's accurate. I have seen a lot of food safety education in the news that is not accurate, as I'm sure you have as well. And hard-hitting. All right, I track our web pages, and really at CDC, what do people follow? They follow our pathogen pages. That's just the way it is. I want to grow our food safety portfolio, but I have to grow it through what people look at. They look at our science. Dr. Griffin was a great example. I know she started the conference, and she does a wonderful job. She is a scientist who can stand on fact and can make messages stick. She's a wonderful messenger, and we need more of those. One of the things that we do is we have a program called Vital Signs. We take our product, it's a surveillance summary, boring, yawn, and we've translated it into, well, once a month we put out different products. In June, we put out our food safety MMWR that's translated for the general audience. And so a few years ago, we did something on salmonella. 2 years ago, we did something on listeria. And last year, we did norovirus. And we hope that you know about that as educators, that you can use those materials for you know, your local settings. And finally, you know, how do we get the word out? Well, even complex science, to boil down into a few characters, what a gift it is for communicators to get scientists to have to be focused, to say it quickly and to say it accurately. And I always love to watch our metrics and what are the tweets that are picked up. And no surprise, it's always our tweets about our pathogens, that they're the ones that are retweeted. And so, you know, that's just the way it is. Science sells. Science can stick. And it's the messengers. It's the scientific messengers, like Charlie said. You know, my goal is to find more Patty Griffins that, you know, can stand up, but then also talk about the why food safety is important to them. You know, what's their story? And to make them more credible messengers. And so what about you? What are you going to do? One of the things that I have discovered, especially in being at Guinea, where I'm not in front of the microphone, I'm not the one speaking, is that sometimes you just don't have to be the meaningful messenger. But I will tell you this, you have to partner with one. And for us, for CDC, I was talking to some colleagues yesterday, this has been a gift. We didn't even know about all of the extension and all of that, how you work. I mean, this is a learning curve for us. You are a gift. You are meaningful messengers. And we really do want to partner with you more. What do you need from us? We certainly need a lot from you. And so it is all in the partnership for food safety education. You know, a lot of times it's food safety education, but for me, it's the partnership. That's what I learned in Guinea. That's what I've learned here. And that's what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with a vision of a wonderful, meaningful messenger that's back in Atlanta. Her name is Sue Campbell. She sits there with all of her products. And before I left, I said, you know, Sue, what's meaningful to you about all of this? And I love her quote. She said, sometimes I get so caught up in the day-to-day minutia that I forget that we are touching humanity in a very profound way. You don't have to go to Guinea to touch humanity. You all touch humanity in a very profound way. Find your meaningful messenger all around you. What Sue does, she takes really geeky science, I mean, whole genome sequencing. She puts a baby face on it. You know, this won us the HHS Secretary Award. The other thing she did is last year we had a Twitter chat, make it fun. And guess what? We're having one next week, and we want you all to be part of it. So I want to leave you with that. I want to thank you for your partnership. I hope you can remember those faces that meant so much to me in Guinea. You know, hit home, hit the heart, and hit hard. And thank you, and it's been just a joy being part of this.
On behalf of the Partnership for Food Safety Education, I want to thank both Dana and Charlie for their presentations this morning. Both carried wonderful messages for our audience and dealing with going forward with meaningful messages. So we should have the question for the poll come up, if our technical folks can help us out there. Okay, there we go. The question then is, will you change the way that you communicate with consumers based on what you've learned here today? So as you grab your devices, I think the next slide should tell us how to make your vote. Yes, and the slide, or the question is still at the top of there. So we'll leave that up as we go to question and answer. So I hope that you have a number of questions for either Charlie or Dana, and if you would, make your way to the microphone right away so we can keep this moving right along. I see one in process. So, oh, sorry, she was taking a phone call and out of the room. Okay, how about another? Well, okay, I'll start. Oh, here's one coming from the back corner. Don't be shy. You can line up at the microphone, so make it easier.
Lynn Paul from Montana State University, and I'll try to ask this in a politically correct way, but I'm not sure I can. It does demonstrate that the messengers from the Extension Service are one of the largest groups who provide excellent food safety education and the willingness to try new techniques. I'm an extension too. And, but my concern is I've been hearing that at perhaps a national and state level, that many of the primary messengers are what is called family and consumer sciences, family and consumer educators. And what is happening around the nation, from my understanding, is that the level of financial support and support of FCS agents, educators in extension, is not as strong as it used to be. So while we are saying that extension does an excellent job and in fact is the highest percentage, we're also seeing a decrease in financial and county support for this group.
And I assume the question is how to get more funding.
Well, I think it's not only more funding, but a recognition that this is a very, very valuable and effective group, but yet it's not being supported financially and perhaps otherwise. It's not seen as a very important group.
So, can you hear me? So yeah. I'm not going to address funding because I wouldn't be able to go back to my position if I addressed funding about it. But I will tell you this, and this was an aha moment for me, even being in Guinea, and it's been an aha moment for several of us as in conversations, in that I have not truly appreciated the power of local. I can honestly say that. And so if I haven't appreciated that, you know, maybe back at our agencies, maybe we haven't really talked about that. And I feel like, so for me as a diplomat, then going back, I've had an aha moment here. I mean, going to all of these posters and presentations, and even talking with Laura Burnworth, who does a lot of our messages for our outbreaks. You know, we've been amazed at how strong the capacity is at a local setting. But we also, and I think we talked yesterday about, we just don't know, even when outbreaks come, though, is that happening even at a local level? Are you all meshing with your local public health department when it comes to outbreaks, and is your education materials getting there? I don't know. So I think there's, I mean, you know, funding, of course, is always, you know, is always a challenge. But even in the networks that we have, with the funding that we have, with the relationships that we have in place, can we start to do a better job with that? And can we start to do a better job than communicating how important those relationships are and making some things work and then taking them on the road? I mean, certainly applying Charlie's work would be a great place to start. Charlie, I'm sure you've got some thoughts.
I think that application is very important, and I'm very excited about this conference. Thank you for putting it on. But again, if FCS is not recognized as critically important in the work that we do in communities at home, you're going to see a decrease in that effective source of education. That's my belief.
Charlie, do you have anything to add? Or?
Nope.
Okay, I have a note that was passed to me by Shelley Feist that says, we urge the cooperative extension to tell their stories through the blog of the partnership, so you can contact either teamfoodsafety.org or contact Ashley Bell at the partnership. But I think that that's maybe the important piece of this, is to continue communicating and at the local levels even, to make yourselves valuable. And we have a question over here at the right.
Barb Kowalczyk, RTI International. So, of course, I agree that funding is a critical problem for everybody that's working in food safety across the board, because it is a challenge in this current economic times. This is not really a question, it's more of a comment to address the previous person, and I'm probably not the best person to talk about this, but I live in North Carolina, and North Carolina has a really unique model. It's called the North Carolina Food Safety and Defense Task Force. I know Ben's probably somewhere in the room or nearby, and he's much more active than I am, but every other month we come together, government agencies, local industry members, academia, the health departments, extension people, we come together and we just talk about what's going on in the state of North Carolina. What outbreaks are we seeing? What issues are we seeing? What are the problems? And for me, it's been an extremely valuable experience. And Ben can probably talk about how it got funded initially. But it's been going on in North Carolina for a number of years, and it's a really great model that I think that other states and communities should probably think about.
Good morning. My name is Lorraine Harley, and I'm a family and consumer sciences educator with the University of Maryland Extension. And I just wanted to make a brief comment on what the young lady over there just said about FCS seemingly becoming less important. Everywhere I go in the country, in conferences and teaching and whatever, people say that extension is the best kept secret in the world. And I think FCS educators are not always the biggest ones in terms of touting their own horn and saying what they do, but we have got to market ourselves a bit more. And I certainly love the idea that you were talking about in terms of us communicating what we do through a process that you can help us out with. We've had so much budget cutting and no marketing department anymore, and then trying to get marketing going. But I believe, as an FCS educator, not just because I'm an FCS educator, but we are on the ground every day. There's calls constantly coming into the offices about what to do about this and what to do about that. And if you're teaching one thing out in the field, you're being asked questions about other things as well. And so I think we do need, with all the budget cutting, to partner with someone to tell our stories and get it out there. We can't keep being the best kept secret anymore.
Yeah. I love that. And one idea, so it was a brainstorming session here, is, I mean, all of these, the great building blocks that Charlie has articulated. One idea might be taking something and applying for a small grant and saying, how can this work on a local level? And then let's say there's, a multi-state outbreak or something, how can we connect what, the building blocks on a local level, how can we connect that out, even for across the United States? I don't know, but I think that's this is the type of conversation that we need to have. I mean, you've got practical tools here, we've got a network, we've got opportunity, and let's take something small, see if it works, and then, take it on the road. It's an idea.
I think we have time maybe for one more question, and then maybe we'll have to end the session.
Great. My name is Will Houston, and I'm University of Minnesota. I used to be an extension director at University of Maryland. And I want to talk to you about positive psychology and the opportunity to leverage. I think extension and our universities and many of my government colleagues have become a community of whiners. We have more resources than we know how to capture. It's not a resource constraint. The constraint's in our minds. I do a lot of work in Africa and Southeast Asia. Just like the example we were given earlier about Guinea. You should see the incredible things that people can do with a fraction of the resources we have. Positive psychology. If we think positively, we're more likely to accomplish what we set out to do. Extension has a tremendous opportunity, great resources. They can do a whole lot more than they're currently doing, especially if all of the energy that's spent on whining about lack of resources is put into finding new ways to leverage and new ways to deliver program. What happened to that spirit of saying, this is a challenge, and a challenge is an opportunity, and we have new means and new mechanisms to reach out and do the job that we can do even better, work smarter rather than work harder. Thank you.
Any closing comments, Charlie, Dana, to that? Thank you. I think maybe that also touches on our lunch speaker yesterday, where Frank had indicated we're here. How do we get up here? But we can't do the same things we've done. So maybe it is a new opportunity for us. I want to close with the poll results. So will you change the way you can communicate with consumers based on what you've learned today? And the poll shows... Dun, 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 dun. There we go. Wow. Look at that. 98%. So. All right. So thank you again to our speakers. The next sessions are scheduled to begin in about 8 minutes. So enjoy your break time and the rest of the day. Thank you.